Thank you, everyone. It's really good to be here with you today in Iceland, to join you here, and thank you all for showing up for the second day as well. My name is Tsering. I am a technical consultant for the European Healthy Cities Network, and today I'm here to talk to you a little bit about who we are, our background, what we do, and really about how cities like yourselves can be implementers on the local level. So really, to start off this journey, we must begin in the very beginning, and we have to ask ourselves, what is the Healthy Cities Network? So there's no doubt that a lot of people are slowly moving more and more towards cities, and what that really means is that the health in cities is determined by certain risk factors and opportunities. The Healthy City Network is an example of one such opportunity, and I'll share with you a little bit about who we are and what we do. So the movement is global, and it started in 1986 as a way of bringing the WHO Ottawa Charter of Health to the streets, so really localizing it. Back then, the idea that health is shaped by our settings, so where we play, learn, work, was a novel idea. And this idea was soon adopted by 11 cities in 1988. And then, at that time, we had 11 cities who saw the potential of this idea and the potential of a city's network and its impact, and they came together and had their first Healthy Cities Network meeting. So you can see that in that image there. Since then, we've been working together, and we've had numerous conferences, technical business meetings with cities, and our network has grown a lot. And we've had a number of larger political statements and frameworks, but more recently, in 2018, we had the Copenhagen Consensus of Mayors. I will talk about that a little bit more later, and I'll tell you why. But it really just brings us to the point that we are now celebrating 35 years of this network. So that being said, you might be wondering, what is the goal of the Healthy Cities Network? The goal of the Healthy Cities Network is to really put health high on the agenda for political, social, and economic agendas of cities, and that the network really carries out in 5-year phases, roughly. And so the numbers here on the screen really show you that we are currently in phase 7, and we have engaged with 88 cities, 20 national networks, which both City of Reykjavik and Iceland is a part of as well. And with those cities and networks, we engage over 1,300 municipalities, and we estimate that the impact is about over 165 million people. So I know it's a lot of numbers, but it's just to show how cities and a network of cities can really have a global scale impact, but also a local scale impact as well. So I referred to the Copenhagen Consensus of Mayors earlier, which was adopted in 2018, and this really frames our phase 7. And what this means is that in 2018, a lot of political leaders, representatives came together to adopt this visionary document, and it serves as a guiding framework for the work we do as cities and national networks. And it really aligns with the SDGs and the Health 2020 document, so they're there, and I know a lot of folks are already familiar with these goals. So the core themes for the phase 7 is these, what we commonly refer to them as 6 Ps in the network. So it talks about people, place, participation, prosperity, peace, and the planet. And within each of these core themes, there are sub-themes and priorities. And I'm really touching on this briefly to set the scene, but I can talk about this further at a later time. But each of these themes have areas where we can address health inequalities and what we can do as cities. And these 6 core themes really guide the work of Healthy Cities and the network for the phase 7. So now that I've given you a bunch of information about who we are, you might be wondering, how do we do this and how do we work on a local level to implement? Overall, the actions of cities and national networks, we think, are guided by these 3 sort of core pillars. The first being technical excellence, second being community participation, and third of all, political commitment. And all of these 3 core pillars has been very valuable in driving change on the local level. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time showing you some examples of what this means and how we do it. In terms of technical excellence, so I refer to our network as being a big alliance. So what this really means is that our network is composed of a lot of experts in varying areas. We have advisory committees, scientific committees, which really guide the technical work and the network as a whole. We also have work groups and task force. And right now there are 4 up there, but they are one of the 4 key ones at the moment that are active, and these issues are really core to a lot of cities across the European region. So it includes healthy aging, place health inequalities and well-being, environmental health, and alcohol. And what the purpose of this work group and task force is to really come together as member cities and national networks to build evidence, to share with each other their experiences, and also know what effective strategies are working across cities. And what happens within these workforces and task force is that then cities adapt those effective strategies to their local context. So it's quite powerful in terms of how our network comes together to build evidence that is relevant and practical for each context. The second part that also Janis referred to earlier and others have is about community participation. We see time in and time out how transformative it is when we engage communities and what it means when they're able to make decisions, and how all of this really feeds into empowering communities and building a sense of trust. And I know this is probably not new to a lot of you, but it's just to really reiterate that cities within the network are already taking on this approach. They're doing this very well. We see it from examples of, engaging older adults to prevent social isolation in COVID-19, or to building healthier places, that the key to all of this is engaging our communities. That brings me to the third pillar, last but definitely not the least, is the political commitment part of it. And what here we mean is that the power of local leaders to give voice on an international and platform can't be understated. And what this means is that our political committee is formed with leaders across the network from across the cities, and they've come together to commit to certain approaches and priorities. An example of this is in last year's annual business meeting, leaders came together to adopt this political statement that you see on the screen. This is just one example, but it's on One Health. And we saw in COVID-19 that the intricacies of today's public health challenges can't be addressed alone. There's not one city, one sector, that can address our challenges, and it really hones in on how we have to work together across disciplines and across the whole society. So really, an example of this to just show you that the leaders came together and agreed upon this One Health approach and signed this political statement last year. And I mentioned this because in April, we had a hybrid meeting in Cork City, Ireland. And again, the leaders came together, but this time to discuss how do we localize it. And I think that's the power of the network. It's to bring these larger frameworks, these larger approaches like the Wellbeing economy or the One Health, and to really put it on the ground and what that means. So we had the city of Reykjavik also participate during this meeting as well, and there were contributions made at that time. So this is just to reiterate an example of the power of local leaders in pushing the work forward on the ground. And just to add on to that is another example to share with you what the network is working on that's upcoming. And this is, again, to emphasize that the collaboration goes beyond borders and beyond the region. So currently, the WHO European region is collaborating with the WHO Western Pacific region and their Japanese Alliance for Healthy Cities to conduct a study tour to bring along leaders together and to sort of exchange knowledge on what's working in Japanese cities. So we have planned 4 to 5 cities on age-friendly cities, urban environment, urban agriculture, green spaces, blue zones, etc. And we have this tour coming up. And this is just another example of how the network facilitates this platform for knowledge sharing. And it really will bring together political leaders from various regions. So you may be wondering, how do we take this forward? How does this all relate to the Wellbeing economy approach? So I have on my screen here a proposal that we worked with the WHO Venice office to create a pilot of sorts. And this pilot is a proposal at the moment. We launched it just recently, and we've received a lot of interest from cities and national networks. I want to emphasize that while the stages are proposed here, that this will be really catered towards cities, recognizing that certain cities are ready to implement the well-being approach, other cities are still working, still starting up. So the hope with this pilot that the network will facilitate is to make sure that it's catered to each city. So really we have about 3 stages, but the first stage really talks about coming together and identifying the current health status. Member cities and national networks as well usually submit a city health profile to be a part of the national network. So we would work together with the cities to identify how their city health profile already aligns with the capitals that was talked about earlier about certain aspects of the well-being economy approach. I mentioned that as an example because we're not trying to reinvent the wheel. It's to re-emphasize that cities are already carrying out a lot of this important work, and it's a matter of sort of aligning and supporting them to facilitate the adoption of this well-being economy approach. And so the second stage is to identify city well-being goals and visions. So again, it's more of a discussion to see, okay, come on the same page to be like, what does well-being mean for our city? The later stages really talk about then bringing together local stakeholders, talking about and drawing up a implementation plan. What are some indicators? We heard yesterday there's a lot, or there's one. So I think it's the idea that we really have to tailor these indicators to measure the requirements of the city. So again, we would identify an implementation map accordingly and support cities with that. And again, can't re-emphasize the importance of community participation as long as also making sure that the implementation includes the community throughout their whole process and not sort of near the end where it's time to make a decision. So that's really important here as well. And lastly, it's to come together again, pick up on certain learnings, and also identify how can we now scale up beyond a pilot. So this pilot, the idea of this pilot is to be a stepping stone to bring cities together, to exchange that learning, but then go back and see how we can integrate it within our systems and whichever cities or systems that we work into. So this is a brief idea on this pilot that we are initiating. We're hoping to kick this off in the next couple of months, and we're quite excited to bring the cities together. So with all of that, you may be wondering, so what next? So along with the pilot, you'll see that the network is here to continue to support local governance in whether it's implementing health in all policies through our technical excellence and through our technical experts as well. The network is here to, even the study tour is an example of how is there potential where we can twin with other cities and learn from them. We will continue to also work with cities in supporting them in showcasing good practices. Yesterday we heard a lot in terms of needs for that and certain tools that are necessary to allow cities to be able to implement this sort of work. We also are working towards increasing buy-in and capacity building. So the technical excellence that I was speaking to earlier also really feeds into strengthening the capacities on the local level. We understand that there's a lot to do and our local authorities and individuals are doing the best they can. So we're here to support how to build onto the capacity, and we have a number of things sort of planned in our pipeline. And lastly, it's the overall understanding that we're here to promote the health and well-being for all, and to continue to add to the Geneva Charter of Well-being. So I do want to leave this with you to think about and to understand that being a healthy city isn't a status at a certain point. It's a continuous journey. There is unfortunately no finish line. There's always more to do on how we can adapt to make sure that the communities are thriving, that they're happy, they're healthy. And so I'll leave that for you to think with, and I do encourage you to all engage with the Healthy Cities Network if you haven't heard of us or if you're curious as well. I'm happy to answer any questions about what we do, but I just want to thank you all for your attention and your time.